All right, welcome back. So now we're going to talk about this expungement fair that's happening tomorrow. It's happening at Cooley Law School in Lansing. I'm joined now live by Associate Dean and Professor Tracey Brame. Tracey, thanks so much for being here today. I really appreciate it.
Absolutely. Thank you for having me this evening.
And this was an event, I know some of these happen pretty, routinely, that I really wanted to sit down with someone who could explain how this works, how the process works. So there's an event tomorrow.
Yes.
Registration has closed at this point. But for folks who aren't familiar with an expungement fair, what expungement looks like, can you start me off with just explaining, if folks aren't familiar, what the expungement process is and enables?
Absolutely, absolutely. So Michigan has a process by which someone can petition to expunge their criminal history, or basically hide their criminal history from public view.
Gotcha.
And it can be very helpful because often it can be difficult to find employment or housing,
Sure.
or even go on field trips with your kids when there's a background check done and something kind of comes up in your criminal past. So Michigan has always allowed some type of expungement process in limited circumstances. But in 2020, the opportunities for expungement expanded considerably.
Okay.
So in 2021, our state passed the Clean Slate Act. So in the past, when I first started doing this work, you could not have more than 1 felony and 2 misdemeanors to be eligible for expungement.
Okay.
Now that's expanded to up to 3 eligible felonies and an unlimited number of misdemeanors and some other offenses like marijuana offenses that weren't eligible previously. So it really gives people an opportunity at a second chance.
Sure.
Right? People who have served their time, who have paid their fines, but who still find themselves hindered
Right.
by criminal history. So it doesn't erase your criminal history. If you happen to be sentenced for something again, a judge will be able to see that it's there, things like that. But it does allow you to move on with your life
Right.
without your criminal history being a
Which
matter of
is
public
something we
record.
hear about a lot, especially with employment. As you mentioned, that can be a big detriment, whatever the charge may be. I know we're going to talk about kind of what the process looks like, but as far as if folks are questioning, okay, I have this or that offense on my record, how far this can go as far as what can and can't be expunged. I know it's kind of complicated. We were talking earlier, it's not a one look at that, what can actually be expunged, but can you walk me through just a little bit of, what types of offenses, can be involved in this process?
Absolutely. And one of the reasons we have these fairs is because it can be a complicated process,
Yeah.
and the answer is not cut and dry, but again, up to 3 eligible felony expungements, and usually the felonies that are not eligible are things where a person could have gotten up to a life sentence or a serious criminal sexual conduct crimes and things of that nature. But then, like I said, an unlimited number of misdemeanors. But there's also time limits. There's an automatic expungement process. So after 10 years, certain offenses automatically fall off your record. So
Right.
there's a whole list of those. But like I said, it has to be a certain time that's passed, certain time that has passed since your last felony or since your last misdemeanor. So it really helps to sit down with an attorney. And what our attorneys and our student attorneys do is sit down with people to look at their criminal history and to go kind of step by step to let them know.
Figure out what's going
exactly,
on.
to figure out what's eligible and what's not, and how they proceed to the next step of getting their convictions
Of
removed.
getting, And so I know this event tomorrow, what you were just kind of mentioning is what's going to be happening, walking through the process, but also explaining how it works for folks. The process itself, I was reading about it online, it's not okay, come in 5 minutes, boom, your record's clean. It can be tedious, as you were kind of describing before. There's some steps. I don't need you to go through the whole process with me, but can you walk just for a general basis for folks at home, what that process does look like if people are interested?
Absolutely. So at any given fair, like someone would come in and sit down with an attorney to go through criminal history, to see what's eligible and what's not.
Right.
At that point, we help people determine what court, for example, they need to go to, because you have to go to court to get your judgment. You have to go to court to get record of the conviction.
Okay.
Because there's a packet that you have to send in to the courts and to the Attorney General's office, et cetera. So you have to gather documents.
Okay.
And those documents could be at various courts. If you have a conviction in district court in downtown Grand Rapids and then one in circuit court, you have to go to those particular courts to get
Right.
once you've gathered all of your documents, you have to complete a fingerprint card. You have to have your fingerprints taken.
Okay.
You send all of those things into the requisite agencies, and then it takes time for them to process it, right? For them to kind of do a background check, to check in to your petition and your claims, and to make sure they're eligible, et cetera. And then you're called into court, and you go into court, and it's still up to the judge. So our attorneys and our students can help determine if you're eligible by statute.
Right.
But a judge still has discretion to decide whether or not to grant the expungement.
That's good to know.
And the good news is most of the time they do.
Yeah.
They really do. And I have been very encouraged to find that judges are often happy to play
To
this
help people
role.
move on depending
Exactly.
on what their past may have included.
Absolutely.
And so again, I know I want to stress to folks at home that the event tomorrow in Lansing at Cooley Law School, the registration has closed at this point. You did mention, walk-ins are open, but you're kind of rolling the dice there. But there are events that happen periodically involving this, so it's not your last chance.
Exactly, and we hold them here in Grand Rapids from time to time as well. So Safe and Just Michigan is our partner, and Kamal Sanderford from Safe and Just Michigan, he is what I call our resident expungement expert. He will be on site tomorrow, but he also hosts fairs again all over the state. And if you look at, if anyone wants to go on the website to Safe and Just Michigan, there's a list of
events. Yeah, I think I was looking at that
Absolutely.
earlier. And I know we talked about it when we first started, but as far as, whether this is, one misdemeanor, one felony, or several that someone is taking off that public record, in your experience, how life-changing can this be for folks?
I am always surprised. We used to run a clinic in Grand Rapids, an expungement clinic, when we had a Cooley campus in Grand Rapids, and I had students helping me. And when we first started doing it, I was concerned that it might become boring for the students because it is, basically paperwork. It's tedious, it is paperwork. It never became boring because every story was different, and it was so, just so wonderful to walk into court with someone and to hear the judge say, your petition is granted, you don't have to check that box anymore when you're applying that says, have you been convicted of a felony? And you could almost sometimes just visibly see the weight, right, lifted off someone's shoulders.
Kind of a new lease on life in some aspects.
Absolutely, and we would have grandmothers say, I just want to be able to tell my grandchild that I'm not a felon, right? I mean, just unless you've been through it, it's hard to express the stigma that comes along, with being labeled a criminal. And, again, people serve their time and you have consequences for your actions, but once you have served your time in whether you're incarcerated or you pay fines, once you've completed that, you should be able to go on.
Move on, move forward, continue your life. Mistakes were made. Absolutely. Okay,
Exactly.
so again, I think we have a graphic to pop up here with the details about tomorrow. Cooley Law School in Lansing, and this is from 12 to 4. Again, registration closed, but walk-ins are welcome, kind of at your own risk. Tracey, we really appreciate you walking us through this and explaining this. And again, if tomorrow doesn't work for you, there are events like this periodically.
Absolutely. Stay tuned.
You can check out. Awesome. Tracey, thanks so much.